we consider our lives to be our own private possession, and how we sort of run on a small track. We run on a very individual, very small track, and we get so lost in our own phenomena, in our own ideas, in our own pleasures, and our own disappointments, and all of our own feelings, and basically we get so lost in us that we really forget that in this human world alone, there are at least 4.8 billion others that, that live here besides us. We think of our own individual concerns, and we keep our minds very tight, very small, very locked in to that sense of self, sense of ego. There's another way that we can live. And I have to say that from all accounts, and from what limited personal experience I have had, that way to live is superior. It is more deeply satisfying. It is more able to address the many different kinds of suffering that we experience. And certainly it enables us to tackle things that we could not ordinarily tackle. Because when we are lost in the assumption of self-nature as being so solid and so inherently real, when we are confused by our absorption into our own little box, our own little world, our own little mindset, we literally are incapable of seeing anything other than the display our ego throws at us. And the odd thing about that is that we take that as being right. We believe it. Hook, line, and sinker. We go down the road with it. We're absolutely convinced that that's all there is. Actually, that inappropriate assumption, and it is inappropriate because according to the Buddha, that ego nature is illusory. That is not our true nature. Our true nature is the Buddha nature. But that assumption, that fixation, cripples us, actually, and causes us to be so believing in the limited perspective that we see, in the movement of this artificial construction of self-nature as being inherently real, that we act inappropriately, we think inappropriately, we react to our environment inappropriately based on that assumption. That very inappropriate activity, that inappropriate action, is the textbook definition of neuroses. And so we actually involve ourselves in a very tight envelope of neurotic activity and neurotic assumption. So hard to understand because our belief in that is so strong. Our certainty that what the dance that we see happening in our own minds and our own reaction to phenomena based on the belief in self-nature as inherently real is so true. We're so fixed on that we can hardly believe there are any other options. Yet according to the Buddha, due to that very kind of activity, we have been acting in a neurotic manner since time out of mind, since the first assumption of self-nature as being inherently real. How odd that the basis for this neuroses, the very continuum of this neuroses, the very sphere that we experience as we move through this assumption and this neuroses, is a completely deluded response to something that is untrue. The continuum that we experience is a continuum based on the assumption of self-nature as being solid and real. And all responses we have to our environment, all responses we have to our own inner data, all responses that we have to the amazingly extensive arena of inner computation, inner response. All of it is based on delusion. How do most people deal with neuroses? Well, actually in America, it's popular to be neurotic. We're all comfortable with it. In fact, we think of it as being an indication of our individuality. I'm nuts, therefore I am. It's kind of like that. I mean, we laugh, but isn't it true? Isn't the first thing that we do in a relationship to define ourselves? Let me get to know me. I'm like this. I traditionally respond in a certain way. And if you're interested in me, you'll learn that way real quick. It's like that, isn't it? We do that, and we think that that's a very high level of communication. We really think that once we've got that knocked, we're deep. We do think that. I know we're laughing, but each and every one of us thinks like that. And the first thing we try to do is to think of interesting ways to package our individuality. Like we stylize ourselves in a certain way. And perhaps if we're real good at it, we learn to laugh at ourselves. If we're not real good at it, we stylize ourselves and take it very seriously. Whatever it is, we've got ourselves wrapped, packaged, and pigeonholed. And the responsibility that we give to others in our environment is that they have to learn the ropes about us. It's a real trip. And everything about that trip continues and deepens our neuroses. Everything about it. Because the more we stylize ourselves, the more we make ourselves out to be unique and individual, and the more we shout to the world, "Get to know me," the deeper into that rut we get. It makes us less and less able to really view the condition of the world, less and less able to really understand the minds of sentient beings, less and less able to really empathize with the condition of sentient beings in a realistic way. The difference, why I say realistic so strongly, is that each of us has an idea about what the world's all about and about what sentient beings are about. And that idea is mostly based on our own particular character. We're a certain type, therefore we think in a certain way, and that's what we see. The more deeply ingrained we have this idea of self-nature being a certain way, the more individual we wish to become, the less able we are to know our environment. We are spectacularly unable to understand the nature of our environment. Because thinking that we are unique individuals, there's no way that we can understand that our environment is in fact a display of our own primordial wisdom nature, that it is a direct result of the karmic content of the continuum of our own cognitive experience and of our own judgment, that everything about our environment shows us something about where we've been and what we've done and what we've built ourselves out of. But that in truth, that very environment that we package in a nice slick package to suit our particular personality is the same taste, the same nature, the same primordial wisdom nature as is our true nature, the Buddha nature. But we don't understand that because we're slick. Interestingly, the way that we try to deal with our neuroses is absolutely guaranteed to deepen it and to make it far worse. Because what we try to do when we feel ourselves to be in a position of unhappiness or sorrow or neediness or loneliness or other forms of neuroses, what we try to do is to fix it by defining ourselves even more firmly. Dig in deeper. Let me tell you about my loneliness. Let me tell you exactly how I am lonely, so that if you do get to know me, you can fix it. Well, the problem is that everyone else wants you to get to know them as well. And nobody really wants to stand back long enough and be free enough to do any of this very well. We find ourselves stuck in a rut in which everyone is traveling in their own private dream. And everything that we do to confirm ourselves, to make ourselves feel stronger, to get a better idea about ourselves, and even to share ourselves, to establish ourselves so that we can give something of that to others in a particular way that defines us, because it is, after all about us. Everything that we do in that direction digs us in deeper to that neuroses. Why? Because it leads us further and further away from the pristine view of our true primordial wisdom nature. It confines us. It embellishes our perception. And our perception is based on the belief in self-nature as being inherently real. We get more and more lost. So we look for better solutions. The next thing that we try to do, finding someone who really wants to get to know us and put up with whatever it is we're dishing out, is that we try to convince the world of our righteousness or our rightfulness. And the way that we do that is to try to manipulate or control the minds of others toward our view. I feel that a certain thing has happened to me. I feel that I'm a certain way. I feel that this has been my scene. This has been what I've experienced. And since I need confirmation on that, since this has become and is painful to me, or is something to me at any rate, then what I need to do is I need to make you see that. I need to turn your mind. I need to control you. I need to have a piece of you. I need you to see loneliness the way I see loneliness, or I need you to see anger the way I see. Get on my issue with me. Join me in my scene. It's kind of like that, and you'll notice that people that feel really entrapped by their neuroses, really unable to get out of their neuroses, will go around trying to turn the minds of others toward their own perception. Now, what does that do? Well, once again, according to the Buddha's teaching, that leads that person even more further and further away from the realization of their own primordial wisdom nature, and more deeply into confusion, delusion, and problems of that kind. So we find ourselves in a catch-22 situation. At some point, we're so confused and so needy and so filled with this neurotic scenario, so convinced of our own true nature as being the ego, so set in a certain kind of activity, that there's no way to develop the inner spaciousness that is required to perceive the primordial wisdom nature, the true nature. We have no taste of it. We can hear of it, we could read some books on it, maybe you can hear me talk about it, maybe we can all go and hear someone else talk about it. But can we taste it? No, it only becomes another fact that we assimilate in all of our facts, and we apply it to self-nature as being inherently real and try it on like our daddy's clothing. But we can't taste our nature. As I said when I first began this teaching, there is another kind of life that one can lead. It's a different life entirely. And it's probably so simple and so naked that it's really hard to do. Because we've been involved in self-perpetuation and tightly wrapped neuroses and embellishment for so long, we just can't sit down for a minute. We can't seem to rest. We can't seem to be natural. We have no sense of what natural means. We're just too tightly wrapped. This life that I am speaking of is a life that, if one could maybe look at the teachings of the enlightened ones, all of those who have attained Buddhahood, particularly Lord Buddha, and I'm thinking as well of Guru Rinpoche, the emanation of Lord Buddha himself. Those teachings, if you could take the nectar out of them, you would hear about a life that transcends the tight adherence to self-nature and its importance. In these teachings we hear that one should actually do something as rigid as taking a vow. How old-fashioned. But one should maybe take a vow of promising to realize that you're not the only one in the world. Now there's a revelation. Or, even if you've come to realize that you're not the only one in the world, now you also have to realize that all the people in the world aren't here to define you. Another revelation. We really think that that's the case. Somehow we do. Instead, we are supposed to look at the world as being the appearance of the Buddha nature in a multiplicity of form. And that appearance and its multiplicity is only due to this confusion that we have that makes us divide things up somehow. But in fact, all that we see, all that confronts us, is our own nature. We're supposed to understand that everything has the same taste, that all sentient beings are essentially equal, absolutely equal, no exceptions. That even the Buddha himself is equal to any other sentient being who has that Buddha nature. And we all have that Buddha nature. There really isn't anyone higher, nor is there anyone lower. We are all the same taste. What varies is our ability to know that. What varies is our ability to taste that. And that being the case, in the human world alone, in that world that we can account for, there are, if you will, 4.8 billion pieces that we can see that are all the same in weight. Logically and even mathematically, it doesn't make a lick of sense. It makes no sense for us to hold ourselves as higher or more inflated or have more regard for ourselves than for the well-being of 4.8 billion others. From a mathematical point of view alone, that's a waste of time. That doesn't make any sense. So the Buddha teaches us, those that have reached enlightenment teach us that we should take a vow to consider all sentient beings equal and their happiness to be equal to my own. So what kind of life is that? I mean, what are you supposed to do? Does that mean like every time you take a mouthful of scrambled eggs, you have to feed everybody else too? Well, of course we have to take into consideration the fact that we are living in a relative world when it may not be possible to give a bite of scrambled eggs to everyone else every time you have breakfast. But the birth of this awareness of the equality of all that lives begins in some small and probably subtle way to create change. If we really consider this truth and meditate on it daily, we will find ways to live it. We will find ways to dedicate, for instance, large portions of our lives to benefiting others. We will find ways to dedicate large portions of our mental activity, which was completely dedicated to continuing our continuum, completely dedicated to get to know me. Now we can dedicate a large portion of that mental activity to being of benefit to others. Our perspective, therefore, begins to change. It's like we jump tracks from a track that was crowded, kind of nasty and dirty, kind of tight, kind of no result, kind of nowhere, and going downhill fast, more and more deeply into confusion and neuroses. We can jump tracks from that into a life that really exists on a higher plane, into a life that understands more closely, if not perfectly, more closely what is. Because that's the truth. All sentient beings are equal. We have to believe wholeheartedly in the equality of all that lives, that no one is any more important or any less important than you. And we have to learn to count. If we're the same as everyone else, there is a heck of a lot more of them than there is of us. So the reality of that is that we have to jump from that neurotic kind of living to a more universal, if you will, perspective. A truer perspective, a perspective that is more in harmony and in line with our own Buddha nature, with the reality of our own Buddha nature. Now, interestingly, according to the Buddha's teaching, that actually brings us closer to Buddhahood. That activity itself brings us closer to Buddhahood and causes us to move closer to the precious awakened state that we call enlightenment. In the teachings, we're taught that we should have compassion toward others, even if it means that it puts us out. We should think more of the welfare of others than we do of our own, because there are more of them. That we should dedicate our lives to bringing about peace, to living in a state of loving kindness and compassion, that we should do what we can to generate enormous amounts of merit in order to be of benefit to sentient beings, and to dedicate that merit to sentient beings, because most of them don't know how to create merit. They haven't had the teachings. They don't know how to purify their minds. They are lost in that neuroses that we spent so much time talking about. So we have to consider that our responsibility. And living with that more universal perspective will actually bring us closer to enlightenment. Now, what's the trick here? It's like I'm trying to explain it to you in a way that's very ordinary and very laid back, because I think that works. For Americans, that's how we're used to talking, isn't that true? We're used to understanding each other in that way. We speak conversationally. We're really not used to highfalutin existential teachings, esoteric teachings, rather. We're used to just talking. But if we could get esoteric just a little bit, if we could get a little philosophical, what really happens here when we actually begin to jump ship and move our lives through the taking of such a vow, which we call the Bodhisattva Vow, into living a life of compassion, into living a life where we really consider the earth to be our body, where we really consider the needs of sentient beings to be our needs, where we really consider the situation of samsara, or cyclic existence, to be our condition, and therefore a condition that we should take responsibility for. What actually begins to happen? Well, let's think again about the teaching that I discussed with the children. everything that we experience, including this tendency to be lost in confusion about self-nature being inherently real, and especially including this neuroses that we swim around in, and especially also this tendency to want the whole world to get to know us and be constantly, crushingly disappointed because they don't care and aren't very impressed as fast as we dance. Even that is caused by cause and effect relationships that begin within our mind. Within our mind. Some of these cause and effect relationships, according to the Buddha, began in our mind ages ago. We can't even count the time ago. Some of them were caused last week. Some of them are being caused right now, today, because of what we think and how we accept this information. But everything that we experience in terms of that kind of confusion begins within our mind. And these cause and effect relationships are exacting. Believe me, if we're lonely now, we were not good friends in the past. If we find that we are poverty-stricken now, it is because in the past we were exceedingly selfish. If we find that no one has a good word to say to us and no one listens to us and no one takes us seriously and we have a hard time with human relationships, it's because in the past we did not treat others with dignity and we spoke in a way that is untrue and self-serving. These are the hard, cold facts. According to the Buddha's teachings, cause and effect relationships are exacting. Now, what if we do come to the point where miraculously our karma comes together in some way that we could not have predicted, and suddenly we have a shot at changing our lives? We have a shot at understanding that we can live only to benefit others, that we can forget what we wanted and live a life that is extraordinary, an unusual life, a singularly luminous life. That we can take such a vow and not only just take it with our mouths, take it with our hearts and our minds and really live it. Really begin to change. Look only for helping others. Look only for the welfare of others. Do everything that we can to make this world, if not our greater world rather, than this immediate world, a better place to be. What if we have that opportunity? Well, actually what's really happening, and this is just talking about the mechanics of it, what's really happening if we have that opportunity is that we are accumulating merit. We are engaging in virtuous activity, which is the opposite of, and therefore the antidote to, the continuum of self-absorption that we have been involved in since time out of mind. Get to know me becomes, I love you. What can you do for me becomes, how can I serve you? Come into my world becomes, let me benefit you in yours. And they act as an antidote to one another. And what you are actually doing at that point is to change the very fabric of the neuroses that you are caught up in. In the same way that we antidote a dark room by turning on the light, in that way we antidote the depth and darkness of this neuroses through the light of compassion. Now, many people will come to me and say, well, I really can't do that because I just don't feel a lot of compassion. It's just not natural for me. I really have to work at it. Well, welcome to the world, because so does everyone else. But there are no exceptions about one thing. When we attain the precious awakened state, we will find that our true nature is the very bodhicitta that results in compassionate activity. That the nature of our mind is compassion itself. That's our true nature. Now, granted, the lens may be real filmy. The glass may be real dirty. But no matter how difficult it is for you to see your nature as being essentially compassionate, that is your nature, no exceptions. How does one begin to approach that? How does one see it? Not through waiting for the feeling. If you wait for the feeling, you're saying, get to know me, because I'm waiting for the feeling. You're sitting in your neuroses, and you will be there for a very long time. What you do is you begin to wash the glass. You learn to do something compassionate. Well, hallelujah. It doesn't feel natural? Well, tough. Do it anyway. Maybe it doesn't feel natural for you because it's not your personality type to be effusive and loving and sweet. Well, good. We just talked about that, didn't we? We don't have to go through that again. Make a new habit. Put yourself out. Change. You can do that. Don't wait till it feels natural. It's going to feel natural when you're enlightened. You're going to wait around for that? If you wait around for that, it will never happen. You have to work toward it. So start now. Begin to live a life that's involved with compassion, really involved. Involve yourself with it. Put yourself out. So it doesn't feel good at first? Well, tough. That's your karma. Keep going. If you need help, that's what we have sanghas and temples for. If you need to keep coming to get inspired, great, I'm your girl. But you have to keep going. There really is a different kind of life to be lived. And it really is the antidote to suffering. This isn't just some far-flung philosophy that some enlightened guy 3,000 years ago talked about. It's a workable and working system, and it works today. My experience has been to see students that I have had with me for a period of time change and become happier and more content because they stopped thinking about themselves exclusively. That through their activity, their minds became more relaxed and more spacious. For some, according to their nature and according to their karma, it was slow. For others, it was like a rabbit jumping into a clover field. Your experience will be what it is, but whatever it is, you should give it your best shot and let it absorb you. Because a life of compassion, a life that lives beyond self, beyond concern of self, becomes like a flame that consumes eventually every bit of suffering that we experience, because without exception, all of the suffering that we experience is due to the hatred, greed, and ignorance of our mind stream. Nothing consumes that. Nothing burns it off faster than love that you generate through the cultivation of virtuous, habitual, compassionate activity. It's a very simple life to live, and hard because the answer is not as convoluted as your neuroses is now, and therefore it seems foreign. But the thing to do, just like a baby who's looking at the rest of their life, is to get up and take the first step, and then take another, and continue, and watch the change, because it will happen. But if you short-circuit yourself, if you act like you're doing what I've said and do not do what I've said, if you continue to deepen in your neuroses by saying, yes, but I have this particular situation that needs answering, and you do not live a life of generosity, you will only suffer more and continue as you are. And whether or not you want to admit it, you're here now listening to me because you want to change, or you would not be a seeker. So please think about these things. These are important things. Even if this isn't a traditional Dharma teaching that you've had, yes it is. Yes it is, because that's the essential truth of the Buddha's teaching. You have something now that you can go home with. You can start today. You don't have to wait for another teaching. So start today. You couldn't find a better time. We have a whole world full of people that need you now.